Something has been trying to reach you, and you taught yourself not to notice. You have spent your whole life calling them coincidences. The phone call from someone you were just thinking about. The book that fell open to the exact line you needed. The stranger who said the one sentence that changed a decision. The number that kept appearing until you stopped noticing it. You had a word ready for all of it. Coincidence. And the moment you used that word, something quiet happened that you never saw. The event was filed, closed, dropped into a folder in your mind marked random, and the folder was never opened again. Here is what no one told you about that word. It was never a neutral description. It was an instruction. Every time you said it, you were telling your own mind what to ignore, what to stop tracking, what was not worth a second look. And your mind obeyed. Perfectly. For years. So the messages kept arriving. They are probably still arriving this week. And one by one, addressed to you, specific to you, timed to you, they went straight into the trash, unopened. Not because they meant nothing, because you had already decided they couldn't. This is not a video about believing in magic. You can keep every ounce of your skepticism. You will need it. This is about a single reflex, installed in you so early and so completely that it feels like clear thinking, like maturity, like the opposite of fooling yourself. And it has been deleting information meant for you before you ever got to read it. The folder was never locked. You stopped opening it. And what you are about to understand is how it closed in the first place, because that is the only thing standing between you and everything you have been throwing away. Let's start with the part you already agree with, because there is more of it than you think. You are not a superstitious person. Maybe you never were. You watch where you put your money, you ask for evidence, you have a working detector for nonsense, and it goes off often. Keep all of that. Nothing in the next hour asks you to lower it. The reflex we are looking at is not the same thing as your intelligence, even though it has spent years pretending to be. Here is the first thing to see clearly. The word coincidence does real work. Most of the time it is correct. You think of a song and it plays on the radio, and there is no message in that. Just the ordinary traffic of a mind that hears hundreds of songs and thinks of thousands of things. If every overlap meant something, nothing would mean anything. So the filter that throws most of it away is not your enemy. It is doing a necessary job. The problem is narrower and stranger than throwing away noise. The problem is that the same filter, running on the same setting, also throws away the rare event that was not noise. It cannot tell the difference because you never taught it to look. You taught it one move. When something lines up too well, name it, file it, move on. That move is fast, it feels like maturity, and it is applied to the meaningful and the meaningless with exactly the same speed. The signal and the static go into the same trash, and almost no one notices, because the deletion happens before the thought. You do not decide to dismiss the strange event. You have already dismissed it by the time you are aware of it. The reflex is upstream of your reasoning. This is why it has felt like clear thinking your whole life. Clear thinking happens after you look. This happens instead of looking. Now, I want to bring in a name, because one man spent a career on exactly this gap, and he was not a mystic. He was a physician, a psychiatrist, trained in the hardest empirical traditions of his time, Carl Jung. Jung noticed something in his clinical work that he could not explain away and refused to ignore. Events that were connected by meaning, but not by cause. A patient would describe a dream of a golden scarab, and at that moment an actual beetle, rare for the season, would tap against the window of his office. Cause and effect could not link those two things. There was no mechanism by which the dream produced the insect. And yet they arrived together, carrying a meaning that landed precisely at the precise moment it could do its work in the patient. A lesser mind would have called it a coincidence and gone to lunch. Jung did the opposite. He treated the meaning as data. He gave the category a name so it could be studied instead of discarded. Synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence. Two events with no causal thread between them, joined by significance instead. Notice what naming it actually did. It did not prove anything supernatural. Jung was careful, almost frustratingly careful about that. What the name did was reopen the folder. It said, "This class of event is allowed to be looked at. You are permitted to observe it before you file it." That single permission is the whole difference between a man who built a body of work around these moments and the millions who let identical moments slide past, unread, every week of their lives. So, sit with the real shape of the situation now, because it is not what the hook might have suggested. Nobody hid these messages from you. There is no vault, no authority, no hand deleting your mail. The mechanism is far quieter and far more uncomfortable than that. The deletion is happening inside your own perception, by a reflex you installed yourself, mostly before you were old enough to choose it, which is, when you let it land, the best possible news. Because a lock someone else holds, you cannot open. A reflex you run yourself, you can learn to watch. That is the question I want to leave with you before we go deeper, and I mean it as a real question, not a rhetorical one. Think back over the last few weeks, not your whole life, just the last few weeks. Was there one event you named coincidence and filed, that some part of you, for a second, did not quite believe was only that? You do not have to know what it meant, just whether it happened. Tell me in the comments, in one line, what it was. Not for me, for you. Because the act of writing it down is the first time you will have looked at it instead of past it. And I read them. Because here is what we are about to do with that event you just remembered. We are going to find out what it would take for a dream and a beetle to arrive together on purpose. Not as faith, as a mechanism. There is a man who tried to measure exactly that, in a laboratory, with electrodes and controls, and a hypothesis you can test. He got further than almost anyone before him. And then, in 1994, he vanished. His name was Jacobo Grinberg. If you have never heard it, hold that, because the silence around his name turns out to be part of the story, and we will come back to it at the end of this chapter. Start with the man, because everything strange about him grows out of something very ordinary and very sad. He was born in Mexico City in 1946. When he was 12 years old, his mother died, suddenly, of something that struck inside her brain. A boy that age does not have the words for what that does to him. What Grinberg did with it over the years that followed was turn the wound into a question. If the brain is the thing that holds a person, that holds a mother, that holds everything she was, then what is the brain actually? Not as a lump of tissue, as the place where a human being happens. He spent the rest of his life chasing that, and you can feel the 12-year-old underneath all of it, trying to understand the organ that had taken his mother away. He was not a fringe figure. This matters, so let me be specific. He studied at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, one of the most serious institutions in the Spanish-speaking world. He went to New York, to the Brain Research Institute, and earned his doctorate in psychophysiology, the hard study of how electrical activity in the brain produces experience. He came home and built laboratories. In 1987, he founded a National Institute for the Study of Consciousness, with funding, with staff, with the full apparatus of legitimate science behind him. He wrote close to 50 books. He published in peer-reviewed journals, the kind that send your work to your harshest competitors before they will print a word of it. This is not the resume of a mystic. This is the resume of an establishment scientist who happened to point his instruments at the one question his whole field preferred to avoid. And the question was the one Jung had only named. Jung said meaning connects two events with no cause between them, and then he stopped, because he had no way to measure it. Grinberg's instinct was to take the next step, the one that takes real nerve inside a laboratory. If two things can be linked without a physical cause, then something is doing the linking. What is the medium? Jung described the meaningful coincidence. Grinberg wanted to find the thing it travels through, and then wire it to a machine. His answer, built over decades, was a framework he called synergic theory, and at its center sat an idea he named the neuronal field. Stay with me, plank by plank, because this is the floor the rest of the hour stands on. and almost none of the first part is controversial at all. Your brain is electrical. Every thought you have ever had is a pattern of electrical activity across roughly 86 billion neurons. No one disputes this. A thought has an electrical signature, real enough that a machine can draw it. You have seen the image, even if only on a screen, the row of jagged peaks climbing across the page. That line is a thought, made visible, real enough to print on paper. Next plank, still solid ground. Anything electrical generates a field, the influence a charge exerts on the space around it, reaching outward, weakening with distance, but never stopping at a hard wall. Your brain, being electrical, generates such a field. This is not mysticism. Picture the cap they lower onto a patient's head in a sleep clinic. A net of small sensors resting on the scalp, not one of them piercing the skin. It reads the brain through the bone, from outside, because the field is already out there to be read. The field leaves the head. It is measurably out in the room with you. Here is where Grinberg planted his flag, and where the ground gets contested, so I am going to mark the line clearly as we cross it. The ordinary view treats that field as exhaust, a byproduct. Heat off an engine, meaning nothing. Grinberg proposed the reverse. He proposed that the field is not waste but structure. He went further and named a deeper layer he called the lattice, a kind of pre-physical fabric of space that the brain reads from and writes to, so that consciousness is not manufactured inside the skull and trapped there, but is the brain's interaction with a field that reaches beyond it, and is, in some sense, continuous from one person to the next. Not a poem about connection, a physical substrate for it. You are allowed to doubt that, and you should keep doubting it for the rest of this video, because it is the soft part. Grinberg knew it was the soft part, so he did the thing that separates a scientist from a preacher. He took it into the laboratory to see if it would break. The experiment that made his name is almost absurdly simple to describe. Take two people. Let them sit together for a while, in quiet, sometimes meditating together, until there is a real connection between them. Then separate them. Put each one in a different room, and not just any room. Rooms shielded against electromagnetic signal. Faraday cages, the same principle as the metal mesh in your microwave door. The reason the radio dies in a long tunnel. Sealed boxes that block the ordinary ways one electrical system can speak to another. No radio reaching in, no signal leaking out, no nerve, no known channel left open between the two of them. Wire both of their brains to EEG equipment. Then, to one of them, and only one, deliver a stimulus. A flash of light, a flicker the brain visibly reacts to, producing a sharp spike you can see climb across the readout. You can point at the screen and say, "There, that is the moment the brain jumped." The whole experiment lives in one question. When that brain jumps, does the other one jump too? The other person, sealed in a separate room, receiving no flash, nothing through any channel we can name. Does anything appear in their reading at the same instant? According to Grinberg's results, sometimes it did. Not every pair, not on command. But in a portion of the pairs, at the moment one brain spiked, a smaller echo of that same pattern surfaced in the other, the one who had received nothing. He called it the transferred potential. Two brains, sealed apart, briefly behaving as one system, as if the connection built in that first quiet room did not end when the door closed between them. He framed it through one of the most famous puzzles in physics, the one Einstein himself helped pose, about particles that stay correlated across distance with no signal passing between them. Grinberg's claim was that something like that was happening between human brains, and he published it, in 1994, in a peer-reviewed journal, for anyone to tear apart. Now I have to do the thing this channel exists to do. The honest status of this work is not proof, and anyone who tells you otherwise wants something from you. Grinberg's results have never been cleanly established at the scale science demands before it will call a thing real. A decade later, a researcher in the United States ran a version using brain scanners instead of EEG, and reported a similar correlation between separated people. Others have tried and found nothing. The methods of his era were looser than what we would now require, and the people who repeat his claims loudest are usually the ones least interested in that sentence. So the result is not settled. What it is a documented anomaly produced by a credentialed scientist with real instruments, sitting in precisely the spot Jung pointed to. Not a proven bridge between minds. A serious crack in a wall you were told had no cracks, made by someone holding the right tools. Leave the crack open. Do not seal it with belief, and do not paper over it with the old reflex either, because the strangest part of the story is not the experiment. It is the man. On the 8th of December 1994, days after that paper appeared, and 4 days before his 48th birthday, Jacobo Grinberg left no clear trail and was never seen again. No body, no confession, no accident anyone could name. A productive, prominent scientist, mid-career, books in progress, and students waiting, simply stopped appearing in the record of the living. His family planned his birthday celebration. He did not arrive to it, or to anything else, ever again. The case is, to this day, officially unsolved. And here I have to be more careful than anywhere else in this video because this is the exact point where the story gets stolen. Around that empty space, the theories grew like vines. That intelligence agencies took him for what he knew, that his research files vanished with him, that his second wife was involved, that she was seen afterward and then disappeared herself, that the lead investigator was pushed off the case. Some of these threads have a little documentation behind them, and most have almost none. And they contradict each other, and they have been told and retold until the retelling is louder than anything that was ever verified. I am not going to hand you any of them as fact because I do not know, and neither does anyone selling you the exciting version. Here is what I will say, and it is the whole point. The temptation, faced with a hole this shaped, is to fill it. To decide he was silenced, that the truth was too dangerous, that the disappearance proves the science. That move feels like insight, and it is the opposite. It is the same reflex from the beginning of this video, just inverted. One reflex deletes meaning where there might be some. The other manufactures meaning where there is only absence. A conspiracy is just a coincidence for people who have decided that everything must mean something. Both of them are running from the same hard thing, which is sitting still in front of something you genuinely cannot explain and not closing the file. So I will not close it. A man who spent his life trying to prove that consciousness reaches past the edge of the body disappeared past the edge of the record, and no one has ever explained how, and his work sits where he left it, unfinished, waiting for someone with steadier instruments to either bury it or prove it. That is all true, and it is enough, and it is heavier than any thriller. His story pauses there. But the question he was chasing does not pause, because it has already arrived at you. If the field is real, if two sealed brains can share a single instant, then the next question is the one that turns this from a story about a missing scientist into a story about your ordinary Tuesday morning. What decides which signals you receive? Put your hand on your chest for a second. Not as an exercise, just do it. Feel that. That muscle has been running since before you were born, and you have spent your whole life believing it takes orders from your head. The brain decides, the heart obeys, the pump does its job. That is the picture most of us carry. It is also, by the measurements, backwards more often than we think. The heart generates its own electrical field, and here the numbers are not contested, not soft, not interpretive. They are recorded with standard instruments by researchers who would lose their careers if they fudged them. The electrical field of the human heart is roughly 60 times stronger than the field of the brain. As a magnetic field, it has been measured several feet outside the body. Right now, sitting where you are, your heart is broadcasting a measurable signal into the room around you, past your skin, past your clothes, into the space where other people stand. You already knew this without the instruments. You have walked into a room and felt the tension before anyone spoke. You have stood near someone whose calm settled you, or whose dread you caught like a cold. You called that intuition, or mood, or reading the room, and you filed it, because of course you did. You had a word for it, but something physical was crossing that space. Two fields, overlapping. The strongest one you generate, reaching the strongest one they generate, before a single word gets exchanged. Now lay Grinberg's idea back over that, and watch them fit. If the brain interacts with a field that extends beyond the skull, and if the heart pushes a far stronger field even further out, then you are not a sealed unit looking out at a world of separate objects. You are a field, standing in a sea of fields, constantly exchanging signal with everything close enough to overlap. The boundary you feel at the edge of your skin is real to the touch and false to the physics. The skin is where your body ends. It is not where you end. There was a writer named Michael Talbot who gave this a shape you can actually hold in your mind, and I want to hand you his image because it does more work than a page of theory. Picture a holographic plate, not the cheap sticker kind, the real thing, a photographic plate that stores a three-dimensional image as an interference pattern. It has one property that breaks every intuition you have about how images work. If you take that plate and shatter it, and pick up one small fragment from the floor, the fragment does not show you one corner of the picture. It shows you the whole image, complete, just dimmer and less defined. Every piece contains the entirety. The whole is written into each part. Talbot's proposal, building on physicists who took this seriously, was that reality might be structured the same way, that each piece of it carries the pattern of the whole, that you are not a fragment cut off from everything else, holding your one small corner. You are a fragment that contains the whole picture, dimmer, less defined, but complete, which would mean the information about everything is, in some faint form, already present in you, not arriving from far away, already here, waiting to be brought into focus. I am not asking you to take that as the architecture of the universe. Take it as a question with teeth, because the moment you treat connection as physical rather than poetic, a very practical question lands in your lap, and it has nothing to do with belief anymore. If signals are crossing the space around you all the time, why do you only catch some of them? You already know the answer, because you live inside it every day. You have just never applied it here. Think about a crowded party. Dozens of conversations happening at once. A wall of sound. None of it reaching you as words. Then someone 3 groups away says your name quietly, and you hear it instantly, cleanly, lifted right out of the noise. The signal was always there. Your ears were always physically receiving it. What changed was not the room. What changed was what you were tuned to. That is the whole thing. That is the mechanism the entire hour has been walking toward, and it is almost embarrassingly ordinary once you see it. You are not failing to receive the signals. You are receiving all of them, constantly, the way your ears receive the whole party. What determines which ones reach you, which ones cross from noise into meaning, is what you are tuned to, your state, your attention, the frequency you happen to be holding. And here the two halves of this video close like a hand. The reflex from the very beginning, the one that hears coincidence and files it, is not a thinking error. It is a tuning. It is you broadcasting on the channel of This Means Nothing and getting back, faithfully, a world that means nothing. The filter was never neutral, and it was never just deleting. It was setting the station, and a world arrived to match it. Let me make that concrete, because abstraction is where this kind of talk goes to die. 2 people get the same news on the same morning. A small thing, a flat tire, a cancelled plan, an unexpected delay. The first person is tuned to one frequency, and the delay is an insult, a theft, proof that the day is against them, and the rest of the day arrives to confirm it. One bad thing after another, each one filed under C. It's all going wrong. The second person, for whatever reason, is tuned differently that morning, and the same delay is just a pause, and in the pause, they notice something. A phone call they would have missed. A thought they needed. Same event. Same physics. Two different worlds received, because two different stations were tuned. You have lived both of those days. You know this is true before I finish saying it. So the synchronicities, the good ones, and the strange dark ones, start to look less like messages mailed to you from outside and more like feedback, a readout of what you are tuned to. When they cluster and turn warm, when the right book and the right person and the right number start arriving together, that is not the universe deciding to reward you. It is your receiver, tuned to a frequency on which those signals were always being sent, finally letting them through. And when everything seems to conspire against you, when you cannot catch a break and the omens all turn sour, that is the same instrument reading the same way. Not punishment, reception. A mirror, held very close, showing you the channel you are actually on, not the one you think you are on. I want to be careful with that last part, because it is the exact place this idea curdles into something cruel if you let it. This does not mean every hard thing in your life is a frequency you chose. A child does not tune a famine. Grief is not a vibration you should have managed better. There is real cause and effect in the world, brutal and external, and pretending otherwise is just the old reflex wearing spiritual clothes. Filing away genuine suffering under you must have attracted it. That is not what any of this says. The feedback is not about blame for what happens to you. It is about the channel through which you receive what happens to you, which is a smaller claim and a true one, and the only one you actually have your hands on, which brings us to the edge of something, and I can feel you arriving there a half step ahead of me. Because if the world you receive depends on the frequency you hold, and the frequency you hold is something inside you, then the signal was never only coming from outside. The receiver is doing something to the broadcast. The line between the thing sending and the thing receiving is not where you drew it, and once you see that line move, you cannot unsee where it goes next. I called it tuning, and I used a party to show you what I meant, because you have lived that moment and the word landed without resistance. But a metaphor is a promissory note. At some point you have to pay it, and the way you pay a metaphor is by showing the machinery underneath it. So here is the machinery, and none of it is contested. None of it is soft. None of it asks you to believe anything. This is just how your brain is built. Start with a number that should disturb you a little. The amount of raw information hitting your senses every second runs into the millions of individual signals. Light, sound, pressure, temperature, the feeling of your clothes, the hum of the room, the position of your own limbs. Millions. And the amount of that which reaches your conscious awareness, the part of you that feels like you, is a sliver so thin it is almost insulting. A few dozen things at most. Right now you were not feeling your left shoe until I named it. The signal was always there. Your body was receiving it the entire time. It simply was not let through. Something is standing between the flood and the sliver, deciding. And it has a name, and a location, and a job description written in any neuroscience textbook you care to open. It is called the reticular activating system, a dense knot of neurons in the brainstem, and one of its central tasks is exactly the one we have been circling for 40 minutes. It decides what gets promoted from raw perception into conscious attention, and what stays in the dark, handled, processed, but never shown to you. It is the bouncer at the door of your awareness. The party outside is enormous. The room inside is small. The reticular activating system is the one deciding who gets in. And here is the part that turns this from a fact into the floor under everything I have told you. That bouncer is not neutral, and it is not fixed. It works from a list, and the list is written by what you hold as important. You have felt it do this. The day you decided to buy a particular car, and suddenly that car was on every road. The cars were always there. Your eyes always saw them. What changed was that you handed the bouncer a new instruction about what matters, and it began promoting those signals into your awareness, where before it had filed them in the dark. You did not change the world. You changed the list. And the world you received changed to match, instantly. completely, and with the total conviction that it had been that way all along. Now lay the deeper layer underneath that, because the science has gone further than a bouncer with a list, and the further part is where it gets beautiful. Your brain is not a camera. It is not sitting behind your eyes passively recording what arrives. The current understanding, and it is a strong one, is that the brain is a prediction machine. At every instant it is generating a model of what it expects the world to be, a guess, projected outward, and then it checks that guess against the signals coming in. And here is the efficiency that runs the whole system. It does not bother to report the parts that matched the prediction. Those are old news, expected, handled silently. What it flags, what it pushes up into your awareness, is the mismatch, the thing that broke the prediction, the discrepancy between the world it expected and the world that arrived. Sit with what that means about what you are actually experiencing. You are not perceiving reality directly. You are perceiving your brain's prediction of reality, corrected here and there by the parts that surprised it. You live inside your own model, updated by error. And the model, the prediction itself, is built out of what you already believe, what you have already seen, what you have already decided is possible. Now you can see why the reflex from the very beginning was never neutral, and you can see it with hard science under your feet instead of poetry. When you hold, deep in the structure of your expectations, that the world is random and that strange overlaps mean nothing, your brain builds that belief into the prediction itself. A meaningful coincidence arrives, and it does not break the prediction, because the prediction already accounts for it as noise. So it never gets flagged, it never gets promoted. The bouncer, working from your list, leaves it in the dark, and your prediction machine, having already labeled that whole category as expected randomness, feels no surprise worth reporting. The signal was real, it arrived, and two layers of your own machinery, doing exactly their job, agreed not to show it to you. That is the gate, described by neuroscience that no one is arguing about. Not a mystical filter, a reticular activating system promoting what you have marked as important, sitting on top of a predictive brain that only flags what breaks its model. Change what you hold as important, change what you expect to be possible, and you change, mechanically, physically, measurably, what is allowed to cross from the flood into the sliver you call your life. The signal was always real, the signal was always external, and the gate was always yours. You are not being asked to believe that. You are being told how your own head works. Now I have to hand you the objection you have been holding, because if I don't, you are right to stop trusting me. Somewhere in the last several minutes, a clear and sensible voice in you has been saying, "This is just confirmation bias with better lighting." You decide the world is full of meaning. Your bouncer starts promoting every vaguely meaningful thing, and of course the signs pile up, because you trained yourself to see them. You are not receiving a hidden correspondence. You are manufacturing one. Tell a person to look for blue cars, and they will swear the roads turned blue. That voice is correct. Keep it. It is the most valuable thing you brought to this video, and if I talk you out of it, I have stolen from you. Because there are two ways the gate can fail, and we have spent 40 minutes on only one of them. The first failure is the one you arrived with. The gate set too tight, holding a model of the world so close to meaning that real signal gets filed as noise and deleted before you see it. That is the reflex from the opening, and yes, it costs you. But the gate can fail in the exact opposite direction, and this failure has a name too, and it is just as well documented. It is called apophenia, the mind's tendency to find pattern and meaning in things that are genuinely random. The face in the cloud, the message in the static, the conviction that the dropped call and the flickering light and the number on the receipt are all speaking to you when they are nothing but the ordinary noise of a noisy world. The gate flung so wide that everything gets promoted, every coincidence dressed up as a sign, until you are drowning in a meaning you assembled yourself. And here is the thing you must hold without flinching. The second failure is not the cure for the first. It is just the first failure wearing the opposite mask. One deletes everything. The other attributes everything. Both have stopped looking. The person who calls it all random and the person who calls it all a sign have made the identical mistake. They have both handed the work over to a reflex, so they never have to sit in the discomfort of not knowing which is which. One found certainty in nothing. The other found certainty in everything. Neither one is observing, because observing is hard and reflexes are easy, and that is the whole reason both failures exist. So the discipline this video is actually asking of you is not to believe more. It is the harder thing in the middle. To hold a signal open without rushing to file it in either drawer. To let a meaningful coincidence be exactly what it is, an event you noticed, that landed with weight, whose meaning you do not yet know, and to leave it there, unfiled, while you keep living and watching. That is an uncomfortable place to stand. The mind hates it. The mind wants the drawer, random or sign, closed either way. The discipline is to refuse both drawers and stay awake to the thing itself. Let me give you something practical to stand on, because the open middle is hard to hold without a handle. A genuine synchronicity tends to have a quality the manufactured kind doesn't, and once you have felt the difference, you stop confusing them. The real one arrives unbidden. You are not hunting for it. It lands with a strange specificity, answering something you are actually carrying, often something you hadn't put into words, and it does not need you to argue for it. You do not find yourself building a case, stacking 3 weak coincidences into a tower to convince yourself something happened. The manufactured kind is loud and needs defending. The real kind is quiet and just sits there, undeniable and unprovable at the same time, and asks nothing of you except that you notice it. The forced one feels like work. You are reaching, connecting dots, talking yourself into it. That reaching is the tell. When you catch yourself assembling the meaning, building the argument, needing it to be true, that is apophenia. That is the gate flung too wide, and the honest move is to set it down. Not because it is definitely nothing, because you cannot tell yet, and pretending you can is the same crime as the reflex that deletes. And the reverse holds just as hard. The quiet, unbidden one that asks nothing of you is not proven real because it felt that way. The feeling is not the verdict. It is the thing that earns the event a second look instead of the trash. The start of an investigation, not the end of one. What it survives, over days, over more noticing, is what tells you. The discipline is not a feeling you can trust on the spot. It is a patience you hold over time. This is why I keep refusing to hand you a checklist. You have seen the videos that do. This number means this, that animal means that. See this sequence and expect money. That is apophenia sold by the pound. It takes the one discipline that actually matters, the patient open noticing, and replaces it with a lookup table, which is just the deleting reflex again in a prettier costume. A new set of drawers to file things into so you never have to sit and watch. The symbols are real as a language. Cultures across the whole of human history have noticed that certain things, a recurring number, an animal that appears at a threshold, a dream that repeats, tend to arrive at moments that matter, and they built a shared vocabulary around them. That vocabulary is worth knowing the way any language is worth knowing. But a word is not a message. Knowing that a recurring number has been treated as significant for thousands of years tells you the alphabet. It does not tell you what is being spelled to you today in your life. Only the patient, undefended noticing can do that. And no one can do it for you. And no one can sell it to you. So you walk out of here with something less convenient than a code and far more powerful. Not a list of what the signs mean. The restored ability to notice them at all, with the gate set neither too tight nor too wide, and the discipline to sit in the not knowing long enough to let the real ones reveal themselves and the false ones fall away. That is the whole skill. Delete nothing on reflex. Attribute nothing on reflex. Stay at the gate, awake, and let what is real arrive on its own terms. And the moment you can do that, something shifts that is bigger than any single sign, because the question stops being, "What is the universe sending me?" and becomes something far stranger. Let's go back to the sealed rooms. Two people, two Faraday cages, two brains wired to read the smallest flicker. A flash of light hits one of them, and across the shielding, through walls built to stop every signal we know how to name, a shadow of that same flash appears in the other. We left it there as a strange result. I want to pick it back up and turn it 1 degree, because that 1 degree changes everything that follows. The flash was real, external. It happened to one specific brain at one specific moment, and it was not imagined, not summoned, not wished into being. Hold that, because we are not going to drop it. The signal was real. But here is the part the experiment cannot hide. The second brain did not catch it every time. Same flash, same shielding, same equipment, and sometimes the echo appeared and sometimes it did not. The variable was never the signal. The signal was doing its job. The variable was the receiver. Whether that second person was open, settled, connected to the first, tuned, in some condition we are still clumsy at measuring, decided whether a real and external event ever became something they registered at all. That is the whole hinge of this video, and I need you to feel both sides of it holding weight at once, because the temptation now is to grab one side and let the other fall. One temptation is to say the signal is everything, and you are just a dish pointed at the sky, passively receiving whatever arrives. That is the receiver you have been your whole life. We are leaving that behind. But the opposite temptation is worse, and it is the one wearing spiritual makeup. It says there is no signal, only you, that you are generating the whole show from inside. That reality is a screen you are projecting onto the dark. That one feels powerful, and it is a trap, because it ends in a person alone in a room insisting the world is their own reflection, and the world, being real, does not care. The truth Grinberg's flash points to is harder and steadier than either. The signal is real and it comes from outside you, and whether it reaches you depends on you, both, at once. The broadcast does not need your permission to exist. It needs your tuning to arrive. You already know the gate. You have spent the last 20 minutes learning what it is. The filter at the door of your attention, the thing that promotes a few signals out of the millions and leaves the rest in the dark. You know it decides what you receive. Here is the turn you could not see from inside the mechanism. That gate is not only filtering the signal, it is the line itself. The exact place where the gate stands, deciding what is yours to receive and what stays out there in the noise, is the place where you end and the world begins. The filter and the border are the same structure. You have been treating it as a wall between you and everything else, with the world on one side throwing things and you on the other getting hit. It was never a wall. The thing you have had your hand on this whole time, sorting signal from noise, is the same hand, drawing the line around what you call yourself. Move what you let through, and you do not just change what you receive. You move the border of who you are. Sit with what that does to the word coincidence one last time. When you thought of someone and they called, a real signal crossed a real field, and your state in that moment was open enough to let the thought surface before the phone rang. You did not invent the call. You also did not merely suffer it. You met it. The meeting required both of you, the one sending and the one tuned to receive. And in that meeting, the line between sender and receiver stops being a fact and starts being a habit you can change. This is the thing the passive receiver can never see about themselves. A receiver waits. A receiver hopes the right signal comes and grieves when it doesn't, and calls the whole business random because, from inside that posture, it genuinely looks random. Signals seem to arrive or not arrive by luck, but the luck was the gate, opening and closing on a frequency the receiver never knew they were setting. The randomness was real reception of a real world, filtered through a state they did not know was theirs to hold. You are not the dish. You are not the projector. You are the one at the gate, and you have been working it in your sleep. That is what it means to stop being a receiver and start being a participant. Not Control. Hear me on this, because control is the fantasy that ruins people who get this far. You do not get to dictate what is broadcast. You will never sit at the center of reality issuing commands and watching the universe rearrange. Grief will still come. Flat tires will still come. The flash still fires on someone else's schedule, not yours. What changes is not the broadcast. What changes is that you stop pretending you have nothing to do with what you receive. You take your hand off the gate by accident and put it there on purpose. A participant does not ask, "Why is the universe sending me this?" A participant asks, "What am I tuned to right now? And is that the channel I want to be receiving on?" Those are completely different questions, and they build completely different lives, and the entire distance between them is the distance you have crossed in the last 40 minutes. Now look back at where we started, because you are standing somewhere you could not see from the opening. At the beginning, the messages were going into the trash, deleted by a reflex you didn't choose, and that felt like a quiet tragedy. All that information addressed to you and lost. But you understand the machine now. The reflex was a tuning. The trash was a frequency. The deletion was real reception of a real signal, filtered through a state you didn't know you were holding. Nothing was being hidden from you. You were standing at the gate with your eyes closed, and a whole correspondence was passing through, being sorted by a hand you didn't know was yours. Open your eyes at the gate, and the messages do not have to come back, because they never left. They have been arriving this entire time. They are arriving right now while you listen to this. The only thing that was ever missing was the one standing at the gate, awake, choosing what to let through. That person is you. It was always going to be you. There was never anyone else it could be. If any of this is landing, subscribe. I make these in sequence, and the next one follows directly from what you just understood. There is an experiment in physics, one of the most reliable results we have, where matter seems to behave differently depending on whether it is being measured. What that means is one of the biggest open fights in science, and it runs straight through everything we just covered about the gate and what observing actually does. I will get into it properly next time. Subscribe so it reaches you when it is out. But before any of that, there is one thing to do, and it is small, and it is today. Go back to the very beginning, the phone that rang with the voice you were just thinking of. You have it now, in a way you did not have it an hour ago. Nothing about the event changed. The call came. You thought of them first. What changed is the one standing at the gate. An hour ago, that person was asleep, and the moment got a single word thrown over it, coincidence, and went into the dark. You can feel now how much was decided in that one reflex, not the event, the reception of it, whether a real signal crossing a real field was ever allowed to become something you got to hold. Let me draw the whole hour into one line, because you have earned the short version. Signals are real, and they come from outside you, and you do not control what is broadcast. But there is a gate between the flood and the sliver you experience, and that gate runs on what you hold as important and what you believe is possible, and the gate has always been yours. That is the entire thing. The signal is not yours to command. The gate is yours to tend. And almost everyone alive spends their whole life convinced they are a passive receiver at the mercy of random luck, when they have been standing at the gate the entire time, working it in their sleep and calling the results chance. You are not going to walk out of here and master this. I want to be honest about that, because the videos that promise mastery are selling the lookup table again. You will forget. The old reflex is decades deep, and it will close the gate 1,000 more times, and you will file something as nothing and only realize it later, if at all. That is fine. That is the work. The skill is not perfect reception. The skill is catching yourself at the gate a little more often than you did before. So here is the one thing to do today. Not a practice, not a ritual, nothing that takes an hour. The next time you catch yourself reaching for that word, coincidence, the next time something lines up a little too well and your reflex moves to file it, just pause. 1 second. Do not decide it means something. Do not decide it means nothing. Both of those are the drawer, and you are done with the drawer. Just hold it open. Look at the thing itself, the way you would look at a face across a room. Notice it landed. Notice you do not know yet, and let it stay unfiled, alive, while you go on with your day. That is it. That is the whole assignment. One paused second, one event left unfiled, one moment of standing awake at the gate instead of asleep. Do it once today, and you will have done something you have not done in years. You will have observed instead of dismissed. And that word I just used is where this has to stop, because it opens a door I cannot walk through in the time we have left. Observe. All hour I have talked about the gate as if it only decides what you let in, as if observing were a clean one-way act. You on this side, the event on that side, you simply choosing to look at it without changing it. There is a reason to wonder whether that is the whole story. There is an experiment in physics, one of the most carefully repeated and confirmed results we have, where the behavior of the smallest pieces of matter appears to depend on whether they are being measured. The result is not in dispute. Run it, and you get it, every time. But what it means has split physicists for nearly a century, and the deepest fault line runs right through the word I just handed you. What counts as an observation? Is it only a physical instrument interacting with a particle, cold and mechanical, with consciousness nowhere in it? Or does the act of a mind coming to know something reach further into the world than we are comfortable admitting? Serious people, with the full weight of the mathematics behind them, have stood on opposite sides of that question and refused to move. I am not going to tell you which side is right. Anyone who tells you that question is closed is selling you something, and you know that now, because you can feel the shape of the move. Take a real, confirmed result and quietly swap in the disputed meaning as though it came free with the data. We are not doing that. The result is solid. The meaning is the most contested ground in modern physics, and that is exactly why it is worth an entire video instead of one line at the end of this one. But sit for just a moment with why it lands differently now than it would have an hour ago. You came in here believing you were a receiver, separate from a world that sends things at you. You are leaving with the line between you and that world looking less like a wall and more like a gate you tend. And now the smallest pieces of reality are turning out to behave one way when no one is looking, and another way when they are observed, and no one can fully agree on whether the watcher belongs in the equation. You have a stake in that question now. It is not a curiosity about particles anymore. It is about whether the act of awake, undefended attention, the exact thing I just asked you to practice for 1 second today, reaches into the world or only into you. That is where we go next. Until then, watch one thing today as if your looking mattered. It might.